Well, we are privileged to have with us the Finance Minister of India, Mr. Arun Jaitley, who's just presented his maiden budget. Not the most comfortable of experiences for you. I think your neck is still feeling the pinch quite
There's a spasm, but I think I'll get out of it.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask you, the biggest problem for you perhaps in this budget would have just been the expectations. The mandate that Narendra Modi got, coming inside there, presenting that budget, people were expecting the world from you.
Let's be very clear. There's a difference between a process of economic management of the country and some big bang ideas which can be given in the television studios. Yeah. You not only have to decide, you have to carry the government, the parliament, the whole country's popular opinion. And you have to do this all in 45 days. So my agenda for 45 days was that it's the beginning of a journey. Let me address the immediate. The immediate is that there is a loss of confidence in the Indian economy. Your taxation policies have gone haywire. Your manufacturing sector growth is at a standstill. Your growth rates are down. Inflation is not very comfortable. Your revenues are low. And therefore, how do you undertake this journey? Just by contracting expenditure or also by growing? There were several items on the table left either undecided or in a complicated form left behind by the last government. Now, to the extent most of these could be addressed in 45 days, I have tried to address each one of them. I've concentrated on the manufacturing sector, I've concentrated on agriculture, I've concentrated on taxation reforms, on infrastructure. And I haven't tried to burden any section of people unfairly. And therefore, in order to be able, so I would say, if you leave out the middle part of the speech and just concentrate on the opening few pages and the last few pages, which are those 12, 14 odd steps that I have announced to deal with the present situation, and my fiscal policies, they'll indicate to you the thrust of the direction in which this government wants to move.
Interesting that you're separating those, because many people hearing your speech also felt that way, that you started off at a real gallop, you were really going at top speed, and then you came into announcing lots and lots of schemes, and some people were reminded a bit of UPA governments that, you know.
No, but I'll tell you, Vikram. India is a very complex nation in that sense. You have the economists on one hand, you have the state governments, you have the parliamentarians, you have each locality, each region, each district.
So you have to play to all those galleries.
You have to take all those guys. So you have to tell that I am creating an IIM in your state, an IIT in your state, a textile cluster in your state, I am doing this to water, I am doing this to the Ganga. You have to carry on this to the power sector, and then you have to come towards the end with the power sector reform. Now, to be fair to the section which is looking at all these issues, I think those sitting in the studios should also be able to appreciate that that's a very real India which is expecting them and which is anxiously looking at the budget. He's not interested in the investment allowance that I have given to the new investor. Yeah. He's more interested in those factors.
Fair enough. So you're saying that the budget speech has to cater to both constituencies, and that's what you did. But let's just come to some of the specifics that you spoke about, of the key issues that you had to address. And you were right, the investment climate was really bad. And taxation, you used the words tax terrorism in your manifesto. You've spoken about the fact that something needs to be done. Did you go far enough in that? Because retrospective tax, yes, you have come out and you've put it into 2 or 3 different categories. There were some people perhaps were hoping you would scrap it altogether. You would say we will do nothing more. Maybe the notices that have already been sent and the matters that are under litigation you can't touch, but you'll do nothing more with the retrospective.
I'll tell you, there are 4 aspects of that question. We had a detailed discussion right at the level of the Prime Minister. One, does Indian Parliament have an authority and a jurisdiction to enact retrospectively? Of course it does. So I have stated that. But that's the legal position. Is your government going to resort to retrospective taxation to create fresh liabilities? Probably we won't do that. and I've categorically said that, we are very clear. There's going to be stability as far as our tax policy is concerned. If you are not repealing the 2012 Act, then are fresh actions going to be taken against people under that Act? No, we won't allow assessing officers to do that. That jurisdiction will be considered by, if anybody wants to do it, he has to first go to the CBDT.
But why not close that door completely, which I think is what people were asking?
I think we are in the process of doing that.
So this you may close it further.
No,
you may tell
saying,
CBDT that do this only in extreme circumstances.
Well, the CBDT will consider it, and I hope there is no fresh action on this account.
Okay, so you do hope there's no fresh action.
We are not enthusiastic about it, because I've also said that retrospective taxation creates an adverse impact on investment. Then comes the last, what do you do with the existing case or cases? Well, they are already in court, they'll resolve themselves and we'll accept the verdict. I think for all the four contingencies, I've given a specific answer so that there is no scope for any vagueness.
But the clarification which I think you're making now is that even where the CBDT will look at it will be in exceptional circumstances.
Absolutely.
And your government does not want to do anything.
See, if nothing
fresh
has happened in the last 2 years, then we can assume probably nothing much will happen.
But going beyond just retrospective taxation, as you know, if the investment climate in India has been ruined substantially in the last couple of years, it was partly because of a very adversarial tax administration and some very aggressive acts that were taken by the tax department. And not just Vodafone, Shell, Nokia, I'll give you any number of cases.
See, now, all those cases deal with either withholding tax, which I have addressed, or with transfer pricing. Now, in the budget speech itself, in a period of 45 days, I have issued a large number of clarifications in Part B of the speech with regard to transfer pricing. I have also indicated an interaction between the CBDT and the industry to resolve those issues. Now, most of those cases are in this category. Is there scope for the assessing officer's discretion, or are you going to narrow down this discretion? I've issued a large number of clarifications in this. Then, with regard to this aggressive tax postures that you have said to make it more stable, there are a large number of steps that I have indicated. I have gone to the extent, even for resident taxpayers above a particular threshold, if you want to invest in India, we'll tell you in advance what is the tax payable.
And that advance ruling, many people feel it's a very significant part of this budget, because that does give a certain amount of clarity. Before you do something, you know what the tax impact is.
And then I have gone ahead and said that on basis of the discussion which the industry and the CBDT will have, statutory instructions will be issued by the CBDT.
So once you've got an advance ruling, then you are 100% covered.
Sure, what is to be paid and what is not. There is no grey area in taxation then.
Okay, so that perhaps one of the big reforms that has come in. The other big reform that people were really looking for was on the goods and service tax. So you've indicated you're going to proceed.
You see, I have had in a period of 1 month 2 conferences of the state finance ministers, and I've become reasonably confident.
But there are still a couple of areas, entry tax, petroleum products.
You see, therefore, I have always used this phrase that reforms are an art of the possible. If I can't get an ideal GST, should I not get a GST at all? So my choice will be between an ideal GST and a good GST. So if 1 or 2 items has to be kept about and we have to start, I'm quite willing to look at that. There are 1 or 2 additional issues which, curiously, it's our NDA governments which have raised them. So I intend to use others in my government also to persuade them and find an amicable answer to it.
Okay, but the 1 or 2 areas which are still grey area, which the states are not entirely accepting, whether it's petroleum, whether it's entry tax, will you just say allow that to be for the moment and let's go ahead?
That's what I indicated. Then we'll have to take a considered decision between an ideal GST and a good GST.
So are you confident that we can get the various deadlines that are being spoken about? First,
well, I have now, please give me a chance. I have said in the course of this year, I will try to come out with a legislative scheme.
By the end of this year?
By the end of this financial year.
Okay, that will probably be taken well a few hours.
I have said so in my speech.
That's great. So we look forward to that. Other areas of reform where people were considered, and that's where the pressure on the public finances is coming, which you refer to, is obviously subsidies. Now, you haven't done anything directly to say we are pruning subsidies or not pruning subsidies. Are you going to go further with oil decontrol, for example?
Let's first start with what I have done. Okay. So on your FDI issues and various issues, your REITs, I have gone and taken a considerable number of steps. Now, you don't expect, when 66 years various governments have not found answer to these subsidies, I should produce an answer in 45 days. Obviously, it's not possible. I have therefore said that there will be an expenditure management commission. It will come out with report, including on rationalization of subsidies. We are looking at it. The Prime Minister himself has been taking meetings on whether Aadhaar in a changed form can go on and be, there can be a scope for a DBT or itself. And therefore, this is only the beginning of this government. This is not the end of this government. And therefore, this is an area which is certainly on our agenda. And please bear in mind that improvements and reform is an ongoing process.
Yeah. But there is one step you've taken already, even today. What you have indicated very clearly is whether you're using the Aadhaar in it, or whether you're using things like the rural unemployment scheme, linking that to asset creation. And that perhaps is something which could be significant if you're using that to do check dams and the like, instead of just digging holes.
And linking it to asset creation, we've said that the Department of Rural Development will come out with their own guidelines on the subject.
Okay, so that again will be, so one, subsidies you're saying is a long-term process, you will look at it, and whatever is being done, those schemes, you will look at making them more efficient and productive. Inflation obviously would be another area that you would have been eyeing very, very closely, and perhaps you would have taken some steps to figure out how that can be done, whether it's controlling food or other supply side factors. What is your thought on inflation? How can you
see, inflation, I've been monitoring the figures. Substantially, it is food. And in food, it is restricted to milks, protein-related items, and onions and potatoes. Now, the kind of steps we've taken in the last 45 days with regard to at least onion and potato. Yesterday, we've discouraged, taken a decision in the cabinet and discouraged milk exports also out of this country, the powder milk and so on. So, we are trying to improve the supply side. Don't forget, as a result of all these steps, July to November is the period when onions go up to 80 and 100 rupees a kilogram. Now, we have created a strong framework even when it was crossing 20 and moving to 25. And therefore, at an early stage, we are trying to arrest that increase.
What has been your inflationary expectations? What is it that you would tell people? Is inflation going to continue to be the main thing that you will worry about? Because it's linked to other things, like at some point, I'm sure you want the central bank to start reducing interest rates so that growth gets
obviously, you see, if inflation, otherwise, if we have a good monsoon, the chance, there's still a question mark, and inflation moderates a little, the central bank hopefully then thinks in terms of moderating the rates. This will have a great advantage. The advantage is to every citizen then. You see, there are several sectors of the economy which are just waiting. For instance, take townships and real estates. There's a lot of emphasis in the budget that I have for these sectors. I have announced a lot of policy decisions, new initiatives. I have announced the REITs. I have announced the exemption. I have raised it on housing loans. These will all encourage the real estate sector. And hopefully, when this encouragement takes place, if you have moderate interest rates, we can go back to the pre-2004 situation where paying an EMI was cheaper than paying rent. If you can create a framework for that, the real estate goes in for a boom then.
Well, one of the important factors in that, of course, would be the extent to which you are able to achieve the fiscal consolidation that you've spoken about. Obviously. Now, your targets are, are ambitious. You're saying you're going to reduce
I call
it
them
down
daunting.
to 3.
You see, I didn't want to deviate from Mr. Chidambaram's targets. And therefore, I didn't want to exercise this option of saying, oh, where is the money and this is not possible, etc. There is two ways of reaching that target. Either you spend less or you earn more. Now, if you take a series of these steps, for instance, the excise duty concessions which have taken place, have shown effect in certain areas, the June figures. So, if we are able to collect more taxes, that's a much better way. And let then look at the expenditure.
So, you think it's achievable, getting it down to 3 within a couple of years?
Well, a couple of years, it's certainly possible. Hopefully, if nothing adverse were to happen.
Because people also often worry about the quality of the deficit number. They say it's as important as the actual number. If you're just putting off all planned expenditure, you're not investing anything.
You are contracting
then you're contracting the economy. It doesn't help you. So
I agree with that.
do this without actually
Therefore, you can contract wasteful expenditure, but then you have to increase revenues.
Right. And the other thing is that can you get revenues from other areas such as disinvestment? A lot of people are somewhat curious as to what the disinvestment number will be. And also
we mentioned the disinvestment number. It's a little over 50,000 crores. And if you see the budget document, it's mentioned there. And this disinvestment target is going to be achieved. So far, I am continuing with the old policy of the government, the UPA government. They've shortlisted a large number of PSUs. The government holding to remain above 51%, and small shares, tracts of shares will be dislocated into the market.
Yeah, what I was about to add to that was that what is still somewhat unclear is what exactly you're going to do with the PSU banks, because you have outlined some interesting ways.
I've made it, it's not vague. I've made it very clear that till 2018 we have to reach the Basel III guidelines, the standards, and for that you require 2,80,000 crores. And therefore, PSU banks, while maintaining the PSU character, the surplus holding has to be offloaded so that they have a lot more capital.
So you're categorical on that you will be selling down till 51% in all PSU banks?
Whether somebody keeps it at 51 or 58 is the bank's prerogative. But the banks then need that capital in order to spend money and expand. You need financial inclusion to increase in this country.
The other area, of course, where you need a lot of money to expand is infrastructure. Do you think you've done enough to send a signal that people should come out and invest in infrastructure? And do private industry have the money to come inside? What could the government do on that?
You see, a lot of infrastructure will have to be supported by financial institutions. We have indicated PPP logically is the ideal model. But then the government has to really restore that confidence in the system. Today, banks are not funding infrastructure. These are all areas where you have to nudge the process of the highways coming up, the ports coming up, the airports, either through the National Airport Authority or the PPP model coming up in Tier 2 cities. That's an activity which has to expand.
And that's a sort of an area where opening up more and more to FDI, which is one of the reform steps.
As far as real estate is concerned, infrastructure, of course, the FDI can come in. In real estate, if I go to Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, you don't expect people to have 50,000 square meters as a minimum project size. Therefore, I've reduced the size, I've reduced the capital requirements to encourage real estate. REITs, if I give the pass-through tax incentives which I have promised in the budget, then that can be an important model itself.
There were still some question marks with some people who were expressing whether there's still double taxation taking place in the REIT structure.
Well, if there is any ambiguity anybody has, we'll try and clarify it. But the idea is you can't be additionally taxed because of the pass-through.
Okay, so you are that is very
That's the object. I've said so. With some pass-through rebates are being promised.
Okay. With 49% FDI now in defense and in insurance, are those two sectors that you think?
You see, defense, I think, will be an area of manufacturing to look at. Today, we are the largest buyers in the world. We are buying from foreign companies which are held by foreign governments or foreign shareholders. Yeah. Why not have an Indian company with that foreigner as a 49% shareholder? You get the technology, you get the funds, and you have an Indian control, and you set up a manufacturing base in India. And I think it's time we started looking at that. The previous NDA government had decided 26. I've decided to up the limit to 49.
Right. Among the people who've been perhaps most benefited by this budget, and it's really BJP's key core constituency, the people who voted you in, the middle classes, they should be happy with this because you've actually given them a lot. That 50,000 in 3 different buckets actually could come to a fair amount.
And why not? With this level of inflation, how much burden should we put on this neo-middle class and middle class? You see, they are the farm sector is exempted from tax. Now, these are people earning 40, 50, 30,000 rupees a month. And you ask them to pay a part of their salary as tax, I think is patently unfair. If you ask me, my only regret, I didn't have enough money in my pocket to give them a little more. But then don't forget, never have governments in the past given a 50,000 exemption at the same time, on one occasion. So I have increased this to 50,000. The senior citizens go up to 3 lakhs. Then the housing incentive on loans, the ATC incentive, which is uniform to all categories of taxpayers. You and I also get that advantage. I've lost a lot of revenue. I've sacrificed a lot of revenue. But I think the policy was people must have more money and they must be incentivized to save more money. This saving, ostensibly it may be a 30,000, 35,000 tax sacrifice for me. But then a lot of this money gets back into the system, and when it gets back into the system as an investment,
then the whole economy
its own movement revives the economy itself.
But of course, if somebody is getting that extra money and wants to spend it in smoking, then that entire money will come back to you. Because you've been really harsh on smokers, haven't you?
You see, the health minister has been very harsh on smokers, and he says he's doing it in the smokers' interest itself. But then there are areas you have to tax, and therefore 3 areas: pan masala, smoking and soft drinks, never get a very favorable response from a finance minister.
All right. But before I conclude, lots of questions that people have also been sending it on social media and online and others. One of them, of course, is this clearly, this also does reflect a lot of the political and other philosophy that the NDA and the BJP and Narendra Modi himself have been espousing for a while. Is there a lot of that coming in? A lot of the stuff that was there in your manifesto, that was there, for example, in Mr. Modi's speech at Ram Leela, a lot of that is starting to come out.
This is the beginning of a process. These are a few steps, they are directional, they are a part of our roadmap, and that's going to be the direction.
Right. Vaishnavi and Anshul Mittal, for example, have also asked this question that 200 crore rupees for one statue and 100 crores on women's safety. Is that a fair balance?
No, you must always understand that as far as these 100 crore odd schemes are concerned, 4 months of this financial year are over. It will take you another 2-3 months to formulate the scheme. So for this year, you give 100 crores. I give a favorite example, an AIMS in West Bengal. So this year, even if I provide only 50 crores, I'll provide another 100 crores next year and a 200 crore the year after that, it's enough. AIMS won't be created in 50 crores. But then after getting land, after getting all the approvals, the state government or the health department will not start building it immediately. So even 50 crores probably may not be spent. But then, of course, we need, I have absolutely no regret whether it's Jai Prakash Narayan or Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee or Sardar Patel or Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. These are people who certainly have to be honored in this country.
Each of them with a 200 crore statue?
No. Sardar Patel gets a statue. In fact, if you read the debates, a large number of people in Panditji's cabinet wanted Sardar Patel's statue to be erected at Vijay Chowk.
Okay, but there were 2,900 crore schemes which led to one wag online saying
these are all,
it's a bit like Bollywood.
These are all schemes in which in the first year to prepare the project report, the DPR, the first year investment you make this around. Anybody who doesn't understand this will say, how do you have 100 crore for a whole scheme? Obviously, this is not for the whole scheme. 4 months are over. Another 4 months in planning and implementing the scheme. You will spend 100 crores this year. If you need more, you ask us for more. We'll come up with the revised estimates in November. But then, if I give you 500 crores for interlinking of rivers, that can't start this year, so I'll get most of the money back. You will only have a project worth 40 crores this year.
Which actually also links me to one final question, which is perhaps very important, is that finance ministers, quite often the big highlight is the budget that they present. But at the end of the day, the budget's only a small fraction of it, because a lot of the really crucial policies that even you need to take to get over the problems that you say you inherited are not done in the budget. If you don't need to worry about labor market reform, for example, or freeing up factor markets, it's not necessarily in the budget, it's with talking to other ministries.
You see, we have such a lot of backlog to do, to cover up, and new steps to take. My own philosophy is, do I start confrontations on day one and go into areas which I find difficult to implement, or do I clear up the areas which are easily implementable? This is the mistake the UPA did with regard to the multi-brand retail. You had 10 other areas of FDI options possible on which there was very little debate in this country. So you picked up the most complicated one and you find it difficult to implement.
Right. So final question then, at the end of the day, whatever the announcements are, and this seems to be the philosophy of Mr. Modi and the government, that at the end of the day, it's about implementation. So whatever you may announce,
obviously,
is the implementation at the end of the day 90% of it.
And there you need cooperative federalism between the center and the states.
Is that one of the big issues, getting all the states to fall in line?
Well, I think if the states and the center behave well with each other with a sense of responsibility, we've been fair to the states. I put up a map of India in front of me yesterday and made sure that every state, BJP, NDA, Congress, left, Trinamool, everybody gets some part of the national assets which we are trying to create.
Okay, so on that note, Mr. Jaitley, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.